Hey y'all, welcome back. My name is Sam and welcome if you are new. Today we're in the kitchen baking up some delicious bread for our holiday table. So let's get into the kitchen and let's start baking. All right, guys, we're going to start out this week by making three of my favorite holiday table breads. So these are the three breads that I love to make during the holidays. They're very, very easy. And we're going to start out by making a cheddar jalapeno Dutch oven loaf. Super, super simple. So I'm going to start out by adding some sugar to half a cup of warm water. You're just going to need a teaspoon of sugar. And then you're going to need 1 packet of active dry yeast, which is about 2 1/4 teaspoons, which is about yay much. And we're just going to give this a little mix, kind of get that yeast down into the water and get that started. And I'm just going to set this to the side for about 5 minutes, and we'll add our flour and our salt to the stand mixer. But you can most certainly do this by hand. I just find doing this in a stand mixer is much, much easier, but I've done it by hand many, many times. I'm just going to attach my dough hook here, and I'm going to add about 3 1/2 cups of flour to my stand mixer bowl. Okay, got that in there. I'm going to set that to the side, and I'm just going to add about 2 teaspoons of salt, which is about 2 pinches of salt. And then I'm just going to get this mixed together about 10 to 15 seconds. Okay, so I just made sure it was all mixed up with my hand. Make sure it's all combined in there, because salt will kill your yeast, so you want to make sure it's well mixed. So I'm just going to let this hang out while my yeast continues to froth up, and get this combined. Okay, so my yeast mixture is nice and frothy, and I am going to grab a little spatula here, and I'm just going to add this yeast mixture into my flour and salt, along with some vinegar. And I'm just going to turn this mixture on low and add in as much water as I need. I've got a cup here, but it might take a little bit less, it might take a little bit more. So I'm just going to turn this on, and then when it gets to a slightly sticky stage, it should be slightly sticky, but it shouldn't stick to your fingers. And then I'm just going to let it run for about 5 to 7 minutes to make it nice and stretchy. All right, so this dough is done. Like I said, it's slightly sticky, but it's not sticking to my fingers, which doesn't mean it won't, especially the more wet parts once you get up towards the top of the little paddle here. So I'm just going to take this out, shape it into a ball, and put it in my greased bowl here. It's just a little bit of avocado oil, and then we'll cover this up. I'm going to mark it so I don't get it confused with any of the other breads, and we will pop this in a warm place until it is doubled in size, about 1 to 2 hours. All right, next up, we're going to be making my pimento cheese swirl bread. And instead of washing out my stand mixer here, I'm just going to do all of this in the same mixer. It's fine. So I've got 1 1/4 cups of water here that I just have halved in 2 separate cups. One I'm going to add my yeast mixture to, and the other I'm just going to use later on when I add it into the flour mixture. So to my flour mixture, I'm going to use about 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt, which is about 1.5 pinches, but you can measure. And I'm just going to give this a little mix. Make sure it's nice and combined in there. I'm going to add about let me get a tablespoon So I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of sugar to this water, and I'm going to add the other 2 tablespoons to this water, but you can add it directly into the flour if you want to. I'm just going to go ahead and dissolve it in this water here. It'll be fine. I'm going to set that to the side, and I'm going to add in some yeast. I'm going to add in about 2 1/4 teaspoons, which is about 1 packet. Yay much, that'll be fine. And I'm going to give this a stir, and like the other one, I'm going to dissolve the sugar and set this to the side and let it get foamy for about 5 minutes. Okay, so my yeast mixture is nice and foamy. I'm going to go ahead and add this into my flour. I have 4 cups of flour and about 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt. I'm going to add that right in. Make sure you get all of that yeast in there. And I'm going to add the remaining water, all but 1/4 cup, because we may not need all of it. And I'm going to get this on low. I'm going to let this start mixing. I'm going to let this mix for about 2 to 3 minutes, and then we're going to add in 1/2 stick of butter, 1 tablespoon at a time. Okay, so this is done, and I'm just going to take this out and kind of shape this into a ball. Now this one doesn't look like it's going to come together, but just keep letting it mix on low until it comes together, and then you can turn the mixer up on high, and it will eventually come together. Mine took about 7 minutes. So I'm just creating a little bit of tension here, and I've got a bowl here with a little bit of avocado oil in there, and I'm going to add this down in there, kind of swish it around, flip it over, and I'm going to make sure this is all covered with that oil. I'm going to cover this with plastic wrap, mark it, pop it in the oven with the oven light on, but the oven off, with the other bread dough that's rising in there, and we'll get started on the next one. All right, moving on to the cranberry Dutch oven loaf. I've got 3 cups of flour in here, and I'm just going to add some salt to this, probably about 2 teaspoons, which is about a good 2 pinches, but you can measure it, of course. And I'm just going to kind of mix that together. Make sure all of those ingredients are combined. Now again, I'm not going to be cleaning this stand mixer because we're making bread in it, and it's pretty much all the same ingredients. So I'm just going to add the flour and the salt in there. I've got some orange juice here, and it's at room temperature. And I've got a cup of water that I'm going to add some yeast to. I'm going to add about 2 teaspoons of sugar to this, and about 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast, which is 1 packet, of course. That should be good. I'm just going to give this a little mix, and like the other 2, I'm just going to mix this till the sugar dissolves, which is about 10-15 seconds, and then set this to the side and let that yeast start to activate and get nice and foamy. So I've also got some honey here, and I'm going to clean this up while my yeast activates so we have a little bit more room to work. Alright you guys, so I've cleaned up, my yeast is activated, and I've kind of switched you up to here a little bit. But I've got my flour and my salt in here, and to that I'm going to add in my yeast mixture. And I'm going to dissolve my honey into my orange juice here, just because my honey is a little bit solidified. So I'm just going to dissolve that in here so it'll be easier to incorporate into the flour. But if yours is liquid, then you can just add it right in. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and add in my orange juice. So now we're just going to get this started. I'm going to start out on low. Once it comes together, I will turn the speed up to about 2 or 3, and let it go for about 5 to 7 minutes. Alright, this has been going for about 7 minutes, and I ended up having to add in about a half of a cup of flour to my dough here. But you can add as much or as little flour as you need for it to come together. So I'm just going to take this out, and I'm going to shape this into a ball as best as I can. Kind of knead it a little bit. Shape it into a ball, and I've got another bowl here that I've got some avocado oil in, and I'm just going to add a little bit of tension to this. If you put your palms down like this and kind of pull it towards you, it will create a little bit of tension on the top of the dough, and it will make it a little bit more smooth. This is a technique that I use all the time when I do work with sourdough, but it works with any kind of bread. Alright, so I've got my bowl here. I'm just going to plop that down in there, get it coated on that one side, and flip it over. Make sure it's all nice and coated on that bread. And I'm just going to put some plastic wrap over the top of this, label it like the other two so I don't get it mixed up with the other 2 loaves of bread. And then I'm going to let this rise for about an hour and a half. The first loaf has about 45 minutes left to go, so I'm going to see you in just a couple of seconds for you, and we'll get started on that first loaf. Alright, so I've got my dough for my cheddar jalapeno bread, and it has doubled in size. So I'm going to get a little bit of flour to work with. And I'm going to uncover this and set that plastic to the side. I'm going to dust my counter with a little bit of flour, and I'm going to grab a rolling pin. Got my little rolling pin here, and I'm just going to turn this dough out onto my counter here. Dust it with a little bit more flour. Make sure it is all ready to go. And we're going to roll this out to about a 10 by 12, maybe an 8 by 10 inch little rectangle here. But you can kind of stretch it with your hands if you don't have a rolling pin, or you can use a wine bottle or a cup. It doesn't have to be perfect because we are going to be folding this up and shaping it. So it will be perfectly okay if it is not completely how you want it. It's got some nice bubbles in there. So here I have some cheddar and jalapenos, and I'm going to use 3/4 of this cheddar, and I'm just going to sprinkle this all over the top of this bread dough. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like I said, we're going to be folding this together again and shaping it. And I'm going to do the same with the jalapenos, about 3/4 of it. Make sure it's all nice and spread out. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take the longest side and fold it over to the center, and do the same on the other side and kind of pinch those ends together, kind of smash it. And then we're just going to add the remaining cheese and jalapenos. This is where it's going to get a little messy, but it will come together. Okay, I'm just going to kind of press that down in there. And now I'm just going to start rolling it up, kind of like a cinnamon roll. I'm getting it nice and tight. And like that, we're going to kind of pinch those seams together and fold those ends together to make like a little round little section here. And you can just, like we did earlier, just using your palms and kind of scooting it toward you, and it's going to create a little bit of tension. And I've got my oven preheating to 450 degrees. And I've got my Dutch oven in the oven with the lid. And it is getting nice and hot. That looks pretty good. And I'm just going to take a little bit of parchment paper. I'm going to place it down in this bowl, and I'm going to place my dough seam side up. I'm just going to kind of pinch those seams together, kind of like you would if you're doing like a sourdough. Just kind of stretch and fold it over and pinch it together, and it's going to help seal those edges. And I'm going to recover this with the plastic wrap, and I'm going to set this to the side while the oven preheats, and then we'll get this in the oven. All right, we are on the second loaf of bread, and this is the pimento cheese bread. Now I've got my dough here, and I've got some pimento cheese. You can use any brand that is your favorite. You're going to need about half a cup to a cup, depending on how much you want. So I'm just going to add a little bit of flour to my board here, or to my counter here. And I'm going to turn this bread out, this dough. Onto my counter, maybe. And I'm going to add a little bit of flour to the top. And we are going to, again, roll this out to about an 8 by 12 inch, 10 by 12, whatever size you like. It doesn't have to be perfect. Again, we're going to be shaping this and letting it rest and rise again. So it really doesn't matter the shape. You just want it in as much of a rectangle as you can get. And it's got some nice little bubbles in there. So I'm going to give my hands a rinse, and we'll get this pimento cheese on. All right, so I've got my pimento cheese. Again, you can use any brand that is your favorite. And you're just going to add a little bit of this right down onto the dough. And this is going to swirl up so nicely. And get that in there. And you're just going to kind of spread this out as best as you can. Again, it's not going to be perfect, but it is going to taste delicious. And this pimento cheese bread makes really, really good breakfast. Like if you make some scrambled eggs and put it on top, it's so delicious. Even with just butter, it's absolutely delicious. Alright, so I've got that on there. And I'm going to roll this up kind of like a cinnamon roll. I'm going to kind of do like a little typewriter style here and just roll it up, getting it as tight of a roll as I can get. Okay, I'm just going to roll it over on the end, and we're going to pull and stretch these end pieces here. and kind of pinch it together. And then I will grab my bread pan. Okay. Once you get that done, you're going to take the ends and kind of tuck them under like that. And let me grab my pan. So here I've got a Pullman pan. It is a perfectly square pan with a lid. It's got some holes on the bottom for air circulation. And I'm just going to add this right to my pan that I've got greased with a little bit of oil, neutral oil. You don't want any flavor to it. So I've got that in there. And I'm just going to cover this up with some plastic wrap. Put this in a warm place for 30 minutes, and then we will work on the next dough. Alright, so I've got my cranberry dough here, or my dough for my cranberry bread, and we're going to do the exact same. We're going to uncover it, roll it out on a floured surface, and then we will add our cranberries. We're going to put that right there. Add a little bit of flour to the top, and grab my rolling pin here. We're going to do another rectangle shape. That looks pretty good. And I've got some whole cranberries here, but you can certainly do dried cranberries. So I'm just going to do 3/4 of these cranberries on this side, and we're going to do the exact same that we did earlier with the cheddar jalapeno bread. We're just going to kind of spread them out a little bit, and then we're going to fold the dough over like this, and this side over, and kind of smush it out a little bit. And then we're going to add the remaining cranberries to the top as best as you can. You might have to kind of press them down into the dough for them to stick. Just be careful because they will pop. That looks good. So now I'm just going to roll it up like a cinnamon roll, as we did with the cheddar jalapeno, getting it a tight roll as best as you can. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of roll this together like we did with the cheddar loaf and create some tension on the bottom of that. So again, I've got my bowl here, and I'm just going to add my bread dough to my parchment paper here, and we're just going to kind of stretch these together and kind of fold and pinch these together, these ends, so that way they kind of stick. Okay, I'm going to add this to my bowl here, and we're going to cover this with some plastic wrap and let this rest for about 30 minutes and let it do its final rise. And then we will start putting this bread in the oven. Okay, so I've got my Dutch oven here, and it is very, very hot. And my lid is over on the stove. And we're going to take this directly out of this bowl, plastic wrap and all. We're going to plop that right down in there. You can hear the oil on the parchment paper kind of sizzling. We're going to put this in the oven covered for 30 minutes. We're going to take the lid off, cut the heat down to 425, and then we're going to cook this for another 10 to 12 minutes just until it's nice and golden brown. Alright, so I've just took the lid off of my jalapeno cheddar bread, and it is doing the last 10 minutes of cooking. I've got my pimento bread here, and if you're not doing this in a Pullman bread, just use a regular loaf pan. And we're just going to add the lid, pop this in the oven for about 30 to 45 minutes, and then we'll take it out. So we're going to go ahead and put that on there. I've got it on a sheet tray here for even heat distribution. So this is going to go right into the oven for about 30 to 45 minutes. Oh my goodness, this looks so good. It smells delicious. So I'm going to carefully remove this Dutch oven here, and I'm going to add it to my wire rack. And I've got my cranberry loaf here, and I'm going to carefully add this to my hot pan and pop this in the oven. Same temp, same amount of time with the lid on. And we're going to cook this 30 minutes covered, 10 to 12 minutes uncovered. Alright, you guys, so this pimento cheese bread is done. It kind of got stuck to the lid a little bit, but that is completely fine. It will still taste delicious. So I'm just going to let this sit and hang out for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'm going to turn it out onto my wire rack to cool completely. And the cranberry loaf has got about 10 to 12 more minutes before that is done. So I'm just going to let this one cool. Alright, so the cranberry loaf is done. I'm just going to carefully remove this from my pan, and it looks so good. All of those cranberries. So I'm just going to place this on my wire rack, cover that with a towel, a little cheesecloth towel, and I'm going to let that cool completely. Alright, you guys, here is a little overview of the bread. It's still got a little while longer to cool down. You don't want to slice into it while it's hot because the center will get a little gummy, and we don't want that. So we want light and fluffy center of the bread, and it's going to be absolutely delicious. So we're going to let this finish cooling down. Alright, you guys, here is this delicious jalapeno cheddar bread. It is so good. Sometimes a little hit and miss with those jalapenos. Sometimes you might get a spicy one, sometimes you won't. But these are really, really good with, you can make sandwiches with it. You can have it toasted in the morning with some butter and jam, whatever you want to do. But this bread is absolutely delicious. We love it. Now here is the pimento cheese bread. This is a type of bread that you can do whatever with. Typically, I have it the morning of. For like a breakfast sandwich. You can serve it with eggs and bacon or eggs and sausage. You can just do eggs, whatever you want to do. It is absolutely delicious. You can toast it up, whatever you want to do with that. It's perfectly good with anything. But yeah, this is absolutely delicious. We love this bread as well. Here is this delicious cranberry loaf. It is so good. I like to serve this with the blueberry vanilla goat cheese, but you can serve this however you want. And that is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you are new. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.